Welcome everyone to another episode of our podcast, Conscious Health Podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about a very beautiful topic, something that probably you don't even notice sometimes, but water is the strangest liquid in the universe. That's our title, and that's what we are going to discuss from the different perspectives. We are trying to merge what happens with water in the spiritual realm with, of course, my co-host Natasha,
Yeah.
and what happens in science, what happens within the body and water. So let's start with this. What what opinions do you have in terms of
Mhm.
the spirituality and the meaning of water,
So
Natasha?
water is like you say, it's such an important element in the sense because water is used for in a spiritual aspect, even if we look at for spiritual rituals for purification, it's used for birthing. But for us, water is linked to emotion. So it's quite interesting when you start looking at that. But for us as well, is water holds memory.
Mm-hmm.
So the most fascinating thing that I find about water is because it holds memory, it holds the memory of the DNA of every living thing.
Mm-hmm.
It also holds, it also, how do I say, it carries the memory of whatever it's moving through. So working with, for example, one of if we start doing Reiki level 2, I usually teach Dr. Emoto's work. And Dr. Emoto is very famous for taking water samples from various different places around the world, freezing it to -20 and looking at what kind of crystals are formed within that. So putting it under a microscope. And then he took that study. So he looked at different lakes, he looked at different seas, he looked at different things, and it created all these different shapes. And then he started looking at, playing various musics to the water, freezing it, and then looking at the different shapes. And he started to see that there was a correlation that, things that were happening. So the beautiful classical music, it was creating these beautiful crystals with, metallic and heavy metal. Crystals weren't really forming in that. And it's not to say one is good or bad, it's just to say that it forms a different crystal. Then he did it with people. He did like Mother Teresa, he did Hitler, and he saw what kind of a crystal is formed around that. And I started to notice that different words have different vibrational frequencies, and these frequencies affect the water, which he started to realize. And there's a lot of experiments. There's actually a lot of YouTube experiments that you can go in and have a look on online. And there's two different experiments where they have a jar of rice, for example, two jars of rice, one with love in it, the other one with hate. And every day, you know, he would say these kind of words to these different jars, like hateful words to one, or loving words to the other one. And after I think it was 26 days, after 3 days, the hateful one started to mold and it was awful. The other one after 26 days or 28 days, it was still looked as if it had just been made. And the other experiment that they did was at school, where they placed two plants at a school and did the same experiment, and you started to see the one plant started to wither, whereas the other one started to thrive. The one that had love affirmations or nice words, expressed to them. So for us, we start looking at the power of our thoughts and how it affects our body, with our body being 72% water, the body holding that memory, and how the resonant frequency of the words that we use, especially towards ourselves, start to affect the body. So, from a spiritual, mental, emotional perspective, as a practitioner, I start looking at that side of things, at the emotional side of things as well. So if you were to take it from another context, if you have floods in your house, if there's floods anywhere else, it means that usually it's emotions that haven't been dealt with. So if pipes start to burst, all sorts of things like that, it's looking at that from that perspective as well. And again, looking at the aspect of crying. Crying as a healing tool as well. It's, for us, it's a chemical reaction that helps when emotion is released that has been suppressed into the body, as well. So that's just very high level, touching on a few different subjects there around water. It's such a deep subject. It's a bit hard to just look at it from one perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with many of those thoughts that you shared and experiments and all of these different structures that water can take when we
Hmm.
speak to it in these different experiments that you shared from the researcher, from one of the most important researchers in those terms. And I think that this brings me to the level of frequency that we connect many times in our body and how these vibrations that we have inside of the molecules, if we are more water, the bonds of water have a very specific characteristic that they allow these vibrations to travel fast throughout our bodies. And that's why whenever we feel these kind of emotions, as
Hmm.
they those vibrations in our body, and they start triggering a cascade of chemical substances, that's when we use water as a vehicle to transport them and to arrive to the place where they have to be, you know? And there are so many things that I could share about water, and one of them I think it's how we don't conceptualize how it is a physical second messenger that controls many of our internal reactions. It is needed for every single reaction in the metabolism. So when we take up amino acids, when we take up any kind of electrolyte or any kind of ionized substance to replenish these minerals, to replenish these sodium, potassium, calcium, all of them, they have this active transport due to water. That's
Hmm.
how they can start having this balance. And when we are dehydrated, that's when we start also feeling these symptoms that they could start with some headaches, cramps. Of course, you are going to lose energy because water is also needed to synthesize ATP and to
Hmm.
synthesize the coin of the energy in our cells. And one of the most important things that is damaged when we are not hydrating ourselves is our mitochondria, which are the
Hmm.
producers and the powerhouses of the metabolism. And they perform more than 300 million reactions inside. And we need these kind of powerhouses in order to balance all of these synthesizing events, such as
Hmm.
creating proteins for muscle, creating fat, using the fats in the proper way, and also allowing the transport in the brain. That's also something that people don't notice, and sometimes they think that they have brain fog, but it's not that. It's just that they have not been hydrating themselves. So if they start their days with coffee and they don't exercise and they have a sedentary lifestyle, or even if they exercise and they don't drink water enough to replenish what they are losing, those are some of the symptoms that they can have. So it it completely relates to what you were mentioning about our emotions and the way
Hmm.
we share these emotions with ourselves, because we are the vessel that we
Yeah.
are speaking to, no? And what have you seen in terms of let's say transmitting or being this also vehicle for other vibrations that we receive from people?
So as I say, water for me is an amplifier. So it amplifies whatever we're doing. So for example, I always say if you're wanting to manifest, you need to really watch what you're thinking when you're in the shower or in the bath, because whatever you're thinking or feeling in that will amplify, and that's what you're sending the energy frequencies that you're sending out from that perspective. I also it's like you say, we're so unconscious when we're working with water that I'll give you so whenever I'm cooking, especially if I'm cooking and everything holds water, I will note what conversations that I'm actually having, because that will imprint, that energetic frequency will
Mm,
imprint into the food that we're eating. So I was in London a couple of weeks ago for a conference for the European Theosophical Society. We're doing a conference and it was happening in London. And I thought it was like, this is great. So like I was going to grab a coffee in the morning before I went there. And it was having an awareness of our emotions and our frequencies. The barista was in a bad mood.
mm,
And I was like, and I was watching him make the coffee, and you could see that there was some kind of altercation that was happening with his colleague. And then he made the coffee and he passed it to me. And I was just like, oh, what am I drinking? Right? Like, I was like, oh, what am I ingesting? Because that frequency, you could actually feel it into that. And I don't think we quite realize how much we affect, because, we do become what we eat or what we drink or whatever it is. And that we could, shift that. And it's fascinating in the sense where, again, just moving back into that Reiki stuff, we usually tend to Reiki the food, so release all the energies that are in there, or prayer. I was brought up in a house where we would pray before we ate, where we all, we had gratitude for the food, which is so important because there's so many touch points that happen, you know, to get an orange onto our table, for example, or an apple.
mm,
Everybody that touches that, from how it was picked to the basket that it was in, from where it was carried to the supermarket to the person that actually put it on, every touch point is imprinting a vibrational frequency and to the water that is within that. And it's absorbing that. Remember, it holds memory, and that's what we're eating. So if we don't wash it, if we don't sit in that space of kind of like that, again, washing with water, allowing it to flow,
mhm.
going with the flow is a great analogy of release, which is moving like water, which is like, otherwise when we feel stuck, it's because there's no flow. A lot of the times we're needing to exercise. A lot of the times we're needing to have a look and sit still. But there's so many different ways that we imprint energies of onto water that we're consuming that we don't even realize. From a healing perspective, you can, just like you can program water with what you're saying, you can program it to for healing as well.
Mm,
So
yeah,
before you drink it, you can also program it with the intention of receiving it, of changing its frequency to receive it as medicine.
yeah, I agree. I agree that sharing those healing vibes, let's say, to the liquids that you are ingesting and to the food that you are ingesting is very important. Also, being mindful of what the nutrients are going to do
Hmm.
within your body. That's the mindful eating process. And water specifically is a regulator of many proteins that are colliding and coalescing into these layers and droplets of concentrate liquid that we need to regulate our genes, to regulate the
Mm.
expression of our genes. So whenever we have also these epigenetic marks that we also inherit from our ancestors and that we create because of unconscious behaviors or toxic behaviors, we can clean them due to this amazing power of water, allowing the different strands of the DNA to be exposed, to be opened so that they can be read, or if you are creating epigenetic marks, they become tightened and they don't allow the reading process to happen. So when all of these processes are happening within us,
Mhm.
we start shutting off or shutting on different genes and different expressions of these genes, and these genes are going to codify for proteins. So I have mentioned in many of my videos that it's extremely important that we understand that we have the control of these kind of processes. And by allowing these kind of thoughts into this water and into the food, we allow also to clean these epigenetic marks, to realize that we are doing something consciously
Mhm.
and we are um, activating the healing process by
Yeah.
by concentrating your thoughts on what you want to express, no? And we accelerate the enzymes, the enzymatic reactions. The enzymes are like little helpers
Mhm.
inside of our body that fast or they allow the reactions, the metabolic reactions to happen faster and to happen in a smooth way. So in humans, many mutations that disrupt this DNA stability can be fixed by simply starting to have this healing
Mhm.
vibing mindful process during
Yeah.
when you ingest liquid and when you are also ingesting your food, no? Because food has water inside of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as a tip, I cheat. I used to speak into like my children's food. Like if they were needing something today, I'd say something like three times into program, like, focus, 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 or, confidence, 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 especially because I put a lot of lettuce into their sandwiches and that has a high content of water, just to try and reprogram, just to try and support in any way that I could as well. That's just an off the side tip in reprogramming, as you say, the water, which comes into mind if we start looking at our water systems within cities, is just recycled water, which is quite important. And this is why it's imperative that we get out to nature and actually connect in with the waters, fresh waters that are moving, that are alive, right, that are not recycled, which is important as well. The other thing that I noticed, I was in India last year and I visited quite a lot of temples, and holding on to that memory, that water has memory, the incredible healing waters that came from the temples based on the frequency of that god or that goddess and that temple absolutely also happen to activate those energetic healing frequencies within the body because of reprogramming, because that water already comes encoded with the intention of that deity, that intention of that god or that goddess that you're receiving. So I found that to be very, very interesting to allow, which is I was like, oh, how, like, because I went into the how do we keep this clean, kind of a thing. But it's just like that, picking up that, how the waters sometimes move over the statues or over the deity. It's imprinting the frequency into the water that then we then consume as an elixir or as a tincture, as something that for medicine, which I found to be very, very interesting from that perspective. Which then brings in, if the ice caps are melting, what memory is being held within the ice that then turns to water, right? Because that will come encoded as well with our history. So it's like, what is the memory on a collective that is being resurfaced or being remembered as the ice caps melt as well? So that's another interesting facet to have a look at water from that perspective as well.
Yeah. And while you were mentioning that, I was just remembering how many processes inside happen when we are born and when we are formed in this fetus structure and we are inside of the womb. Water is the vehicle also to transmit all the nutrients,
Absolutely.
fluids, and that we
Hmm.
receive from the mother, and the vibrations, the emotions of the mother are also passed on through this liquid. That's why there are now many research and there is now many evidence
Hmm.
that many of the womb messages that we receive when we were inside of our moms and
Hmm.
the type of emotions that the mom had to us towards this pregnancy, they are extremely important because they are going to mark us and they are going to create these epigenetic marks again. And there is so much to discover yet in terms of the memory that is withholding these molecules of water, no?
But that's the fascinating thing when you start looking at those epigenetic markers that are formed. It's almost like it creates, it's almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the body is built in a way so that when the baby is birthed, it's already ready for its environment based on the emotional frequencies that have been transmitted. I think our brains develop differently. We develop differently in order to adjust to the environment as we're born into.
Yes, 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 yes. We
Absolutely.
we adapt to the environment and we are ready, we are formed, we are fully developed when
Mm.
we arrive to this birth um, stage. But there are many, let's say, trimesters during the pregnancy where we receive different messages
Yeah,
from these emotions that can be from the mom, that can be from outside the environment that the mom is living, and that also now has been discovered that we receive many of those messages, and those messages are imprinted from our
yeah,
ancestors.
yeah.
So that's I mean, that's the most amazing connection that I can find that links this science of water, this science of how the structure of water has to be so special, so particular, and so specific in terms of the places and of the bones, in terms of the different capabilities that it has to allow the transmission of all these vibrations and all of this information. So I can just imagine that with the advancement of science and now with
Mm.
the use of AI, now that it can be used to decodify the folding of the proteins, what can we do now in the next stage to decodify the messages of water? That could be
Mm. And that's important. Yeah, that would be absolutely extremely amazing. And I also don't think we've actually fully discovered the healing power of water either. So looking at the salt water from the seas as well, it's
amazing.
quite interesting that we don't know the healing capabilities. Now, I know that the indigenous nations were always like I knew whenever I used to go to to the beach in South Africa, I was always asked to bring back a 2 liter Coke bottle of seawater because it was medicine. And we all knew that once we had gone in, whether it's the salt content, the water, whatever it might be, that combination of the salt water was extremely potent for all sorts of health reasons as well, whether you had colds or flus, whether it was to reset your digestive system. However it was working, it was very much there is that power of that water, and there's healing powers of water in various different pockets. I know there's healing waters in Greece that many people go to, and it's looking at again looking at that vibrational frequency and how it shifts within our own physical body as well.
Yeah. One of the properties that water is doing to heal our bodies is just well, I think that people won't imagine, but when we are in this sympathetic activation, when we are under stress, when we are angry, when we are in any kind of challenging emotion, and we drink water, and we, but this is another level, but if we give the thoughts of water so that it can calm us also, and so that it can help us to alleviate
Mm-hmm.
the misalignment that we are having. There are many clinical trials and many experiments that they have done that drinking just 500 milliliters of water increases our metabolic resting
Mm.
speed by 30%. So just allowing this process to happen has a thermogenic effect in 30 or 40 minutes. And that's when you start feeling peaceful. And I have seen this even in pets.
Mm.
Uh, We had a new dog
Mm-hmm.
just a few months back, and we went to have breakfast in a restaurant, and she was just sitting down, but she hadn't been drinking water since, I don't know, like more than an hour, almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
And she was very aggressive with the other dogs. And we didn't understand why she was like that, because she was always very calm and very patient and things like that. But any dog that approach her, she bark. And
Okay.
then when when we arrived to our home and we gave her water, she started drinking like desperate, and she suddenly changed. The
Mm.
whole mood start changing, and that's how we can also recognize that many times it's not hunger, it's not food that we need, it's what
Yes,
we need.
water.
And that's how we can regulate our system, and that's how can we regulate our temperature, and that's how we regulate our metabolism. And this energy that we are generating, 40% of this comes from warming the water to the body temperature. So the other 60% of the energy that water is giving us is driven by the system, the activation of the sympathetic system, and then changing this system into a different kind of regular buffering. Let's say you buffer yourself with the water that you are ingesting. No, so drinking cold water also has been shown to spike the resting energy
Mm.
by 25% for more than 40 minutes. So that's why having these cold water drinks before you are going to train is the
Mm-hmm.
best that you can do.
Okay. Yes, the temperature of water is quite interesting as well in what it does to the body too. Could you speak more to that? Because from an Ayurvedic perspective, they have said never to drink cold water. It always needs to be room temperature,
Mhm.
which is a lot healthier for you as well. So I find that quite interesting from that perspective. Can you comment on that in the temperature of water and how it affects the body?
Yeah, well, it depends on what you need, and it depends,
Hmm.
of course, the kind of activity that you are performing. If you are not a very active person and you drink cold water, yes, maybe you don't need that kind of energy
Hmm.
that you are generating by warming the water. But what is has been found is that when we consume this cold water, our body spends some energy creating this temperature inside of it, and the other percentage of energy that has to be used from the cold water is the energy that is being used by the nervous system to be
Hmm.
regulated in terms of allowing the oxidation processes of many of the nutrients that we have. So all that 60% of energy that is still there in the cold
Mm-hmm.
water and that needs to be heated is expended on the metabolic reactions. So that's the concept that they have found, that drinking this cold water when you are doing exercise or before you are
Yeah.
doing exercise helps you. And that's why athletes they have this cold beverage around them
Mm-hmm.
on matches in any kind of a sport. They don't drink room temperature water. They don't drink hot water. They drink cold water because they need that kind of energy to regulate
Energy.
all the activity that they are going to perform. No?
Which is why cold water plunges help as well. So immersing your body into cold water as well also activates those
Yeah,
systems too, right?
activates also some proteins that they are called heat shock proteins,
Mm-hmm.
and they are regulated by temperature. So they can either be activated by cold or by the sauna also. No.
Yes. Yeah. No, I find that very, very fascinating from that perspective. So the other aspect of working with water in a spiritual context is, besides water representing purification, I mean, we go through the whole baptism, kind of aspect
Yeah.
from that, yeah, from a Christian perspective, Catholic perspective as well. It also symbolizes life and rebirth too, which is very, very interesting if we're looking at rebirthing. mm, I suppose rituals, we used to tend to use a lot of water again because it represents the whole birthing process too. But in a sense, water also teaches us to surrender, to stop.
Mm.
That's why there's those sayings, in Portuguese, like, where you say a maré contra a maré, which is like,
Mm.
where you're kind of like trying to like, how do you say that in English? I just can't think, when you're swimming, when you're rowing your boat upstream,
Against,
yeah,
yes,
against the thing.
the
So
current.
it's the current. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot harder. So it's actually quite beautiful in the sense of moving through life like water, um, right? And really moving with the flow and deciding, okay, which is the streams. And even if you have these kind of like boulders in your way, water can dissolve anything.
Hmm.
Right. It's quite incredible how we work through that. And I suppose if we look at it from the fact of emotions, like you say, and how it affects the body, it is absolutely incredible and imperative that we become conscious of how we are working with water. And I actually don't even think that we've known half of what water can do to support us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, because that's the other thing, is a great analogy of physical, the mind, body, and the soul in that sense of looking at a solid, a liquid, and a gas, because water is also the only element that exists in three facets
Mm.
as
Mm.
well. So that is quite an interesting looking at it from that, mother, father, son, the mind is the air aspect of it,
Great.
right? Or it's the vapor aspect of it. The body would be the ice, the most densest aspect of it as well. So
Yeah,
I find it very fascinating.
those physical changes are the ones that are being explored right now in many, many experiments that they are performing, because now they might be a fourth stage that water is um, taking, but we don't have the level of speed to recognize it. So I was watching a documentary about this, that they performed some experiments of how if you froze water to minus 45 degrees or something like that, and they were doing these experiments with extremely powerful lasers and
Hmm.
measuring the kind of pattern that water is forming, they discover that when it passes from a very, very low temperature into the liquid stage, there is one phase that it doesn't even have a name right now, that we can't perceive through our eyes, but it's changing. And what they now are trying to research is what is the position of the molecules of water, so that it can allow the switching of the different physical aspects. No, I don't know if this has to be related to many. I'm just thinking out loud
Hmm.
that maybe this is something that it's gonna be in the future, the way they can discover how we can teletransport from one
Hmm.
place to another place. No,
Yeah,
I don't know,
that would
because
make sense.
if they discover this way of how molecules are arranged and how they transform into different states, we
Hmm.
could travel in time faster, no?
Because
Supposedly.
that would be it. Because it would be a, a breaking down of the molecules and recreating them somewhere else, right? Or a resonance of it somewhere else as well, which is quite fascinating. I think we'll have to watch to see what's happening. Um, out there in that sense. And speaking about beaming up and all sorts of things from a spiritual perspective as well, from looking at it from, and this might totally sound conspiracy theory too, is that and we were speaking about this earlier with Earth being one of the few planets that has quite a lot of water. There is the thought that maybe it was a bargaining chip with other alien beings, as in switching, giving water in return for ideas in technology advancements. So it was almost like a trade-off that happens with giving away water, because there's some planets that actually absolutely don't have water, need water. That is yeah, it's an agreement that there is with this planet and others. And in saying that, just to take that further, the reason we have such a depth and breadth of animals like flora and fauna is because of having all of these spaceships arriving and creating these different species of plant life, different species of animal, and that ended up absolutely being able to thrive here because that we hold water. So that I'm just putting it out there. I'm just pushing that bar a little bit more to that side of the field a
Yeah.
little bit, with regards to how precious our water is and how special it is. I don't think we quite realize the significance of water,
Yeah.
and its properties and its gifts just yet.
And well, talking about those aspects of aliens and those things, I really think the more I listen and the more I research about how the body performs the different kind of processes, mostly how the DNA molecule can withhold so much information and
Hmm.
so much wisdom throughout ages. There is a that is not a I don't think it's a conspiracy in theory, but
Yep.
it is thought that there is a chromosome, the chromosome 2, that
Hmm.
was not there is no explanation on the evolution of this chromosome, because it has a different structure toward related to the other ones, and it is thought that something from outside from this Earth happen in this kind of chromosome, and it happened in a very specific time point. So I I wouldn't be um, getting out of science if we think
Hmm.
that we have this inheritance and we have this trade-off with other uh, alien cultures, and we need this kind of information, of course, to evolve into the future of humanity that is going to come, no? And talking about more earth things
Yep.
and coming back to some science, I what I did. many times before an exam, and this has to do with allowing your brain to operate into water system, is that I used to swim, or I used to have a session of exercise, but it was in swimming, and it was focusing on the exam, focusing on the things that I learned before the exams, and I always perform much better than my
Mm,
classmates because I did this exercise, and I
okay.
didn't even know in those stages that many of those processes are happening inside of us. So there is a now there are a lot of studies that if you deplete the body from 12 to 16 hours of fluid, you decrease the total brain volume by
Mm,
0.5%. So you lose brain. Every time you become dehydrated, you are losing part of your brain. And that's why there are also many people that they have this cognitive load, that they can concentrate and they have this reduced attention span because they don't consume water and they are not conscious that dehydration is going to shift the volume of our brain cells and the conduction of impulses. We need water to conduct the electric impulses. And there are some MRA studies that measure how the brain can become atrophy by
mm.
being dehydrated, and that also can lead in the future, if you are not very conscious and you don't hydrate well, to Alzheimer disease, no?
Yeah. Yeah. Not, and also the knock-on effect that it has on your digestive system as well, in
Mhm.
being dehydrated too, which we tend to look at not. So when somebody has digestive issues as well, we look at holding on to emotions that should be let go. So it's absolutely holding on to stuff and not allowing the emotion to flow in that sense of causing all sorts of digestive issues as well. It's fascinating. So what are your tips, David, for from a physical perspective? From
Well, we
a
need to be very.
scientific perspective, besides drink lots of water. Actually, is there a, so everybody says you need to drink 2 liters of water a day, but some of us are taller, some of us are a little bit, our bodies are all different. What are your
It
thoughts on
depends.
that?
Yeah, there is not a very specific amount of water that we need.
Mm,
I mean, 2 liters is like the overall or the average
hmm.
for
Yeah.
everyone. And but as you mentioned, it depends on your level of composition,
Hmm.
it depends on your activity, but for sure, your body is going to ask you for water. Whenever you
Hmm.
are thirsty, that means that you are already dehydrated.
Okay.
So you shouldn't arrive to this level of being thirst in that anxious thirst, because then your body is already using that low energy, let's say,
Hmm.
mechanism. And you can be, let's say, not that dramatic, but you can be destroying yourself in terms of
Hmm.
the digestion that you are going to have, the brain processes that you are going to have, and even the mood that you are going to have, no? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's not that you are hungry for food, but that you are
You're
dehydrated.
thirsty.
So what I recommend is that people attune more to their bodies, that the first thing that they should do when they wake up is to drink at least 1 liter of water. That is a good recommendation, because when we sleep, we lose a lot of water
Mm.
through the process of sweating during the night, even if it's not hot. But nowadays that we have these heat waves, there is
Hmm.
even more need to hydrate when you wake up and before you consume coffee, because coffee is going to allow you to lose more water, no? Because it's
Yeah.
how to say, a diuretic effect.
Yeah.
It has a diuretic effect. So, and it allows also the DNA to be processed well. As I explained before, the proteins are becoming exposed, the ones that the clean, the epigenetic marks that we want to clean, they
Hmm.
become exposed, they become taken away, and we shut off the genes that we need to shut off. We shut on the genes that we need to turn on. So we need this level of disposition of water inside our bodies, and the mitochondria, the powerhouses that perform
Hmm.
all the metabolic reactions, they need water to create energy. So if you don't have enough water, you won't have the enough energy for your activities, and that's why you are tired, and that's why you have TDA, that or that's why you have all of these issues with your attention span, you know?
Absolutely. Love that.
Yeah, yeah. What can
And
you tell them in
from
terms of
my
the spirituality?
pardon, in terms of
In terms of the spiritual
the
messages that
spiritual side is absolutely actually I I like to I like to experiment with all the spiritual stuff that's happening or or just how different practitioners work as well from anything. I'll try anything almost anything at least once. And it was so interesting. I was in Toronto once and I was at this fair and there was this nun that would actually read your future based on water, a cup of water.
oh, nice.
And I thought that I had to try that. I had to go and see what that looked like and how that worked energetically as well. But I suppose anything that you hold for long enough will have an imprint of you as water does as well. So I think she was, I mean, all of these tools are really just tools. It really is our intuition that we are using. But for me, it's more be mindful of the water that you are consuming. If there's a glass of water on the table and there's been an argument, do not drink that water because you're consuming a lot of that. So for me, the biggest thing is really have a look at or be conscious of what you are saying around water. And then you can also alchemize the water by, holding on to the glass of water, setting your intention, and really setting that intention to change the frequency of the water before you drink it. So it's so I have a spiritualist background, David, and it's so interesting because we used to sit on a Thursday, we used to do a bit of a study, then we used to do like a kind of a prayer or automatic writing, but we always had a jar of water on the table with a cloth, and we would ask for just healing to happen.
Mm,
And you can do this. Try this when you go to sleep at night. Put a glass of
mm,
water next to your bedside. Ask for it to be alchemized for medicine. And
mm,
usually in the morning you'll start to see, and this was used to happen when we used to do our circle on a Thursday. The the water used to bubble. You could actually see bubbles in the water, and then when you drink it, it tastes very, very different. So I'm going to implore people to experiment with water. The other way that you can do it, which is what I'm experimenting with right now, is you can write certain words. So glass is better than plastic.
mhm,
But you can place certain, if you're looking at alchemy, certain symbols to imprint the water before you drink it.
mm. Yeah.
So I'm wanting to experiment with that right now in seeing the different symbology and what we can put it, and also numbers, different number frequencies will also hold a frequency of some sort. So I'm going to start playing with that just to see how that works as well on a very rudimentary way, but either just drawing on the glass or writing it and on a sticker and placing it on there will change the frequency of the water, and then playing music to the water as well. So
Oh,
Beethoven, is it Beethoven's Seventh
Mozart.
Symphony? Has healing
Mo-
properties. So if you play it to the water, drink it afterwards, it's like drinking medicine.
mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree, and maybe we can even record a short episode or a short transmission just so that you can share with us the results of the experiment with the labels and with the messages of water. No?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that just to see. I'm going to have to start documenting it.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you. everyone. And thank you, of course, Natasha, for this topic. We are going to
Thank you.
be speaking about these five elements that we have within us. We started with water because it was, I think, the most interesting
Mm.
right now. We will follow up with the next one we haven't decided, but stay tuned so that
Yep.
so that you can watch the next episode of the elements of the universe that we share. Thank you for listening. We will listen to each other on our next episode. And as usual, we encourage you to leave us questions, messages, or even suggest guests that you want us to interview, and to subscribe to our channels and to support us to give us a review in any of the channels. Thank you and see
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.